So hi, my name is Zain Ahmed. I'm an intern here at the Mosaic Cross-Cultural Center, and today I wanted to host a discussion on decolonizing our self-hate as queer people of color. So I want to introduce my panel for today. Would you each like to introduce yourself?
So my name is Yesenia Ramos Castellon, and I'm a graduate student at San Jose State in the Mexican American Studies program. And I do a lot of work in the community around criminalization. Yeah, that's me.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Helen. I'm also a graduate student at San Jose State in the major of speech-language pathology. I'm a newbie organizer within the Asian American community around Black Lives Matter and police brutality.
My name is Jerica Lowman. I am a graduating senior for Photojournalism, and I write a column for the Spartan Daily. It's called Phenomenally Feminist. So a lot of what I write about, I guess, talks about issues within women's rights, LGBT rights, in that kind of like a spectrum of, human rights, basically. Cool. So that's kind of what I want to focus on as a journalist.
Cool. Yeah, thank you all for being here. So, what really inspired me to have this discussion was watching the show Empire. I don't know if any of you watched it.
I love the show.
So, I think there's a lot of discussion when the first episode came out. The characters in the show is this gay black male named Jamal who is a child of like this hip hop mogul CEO of Empire named Lucius Lyon, and he's struggling to come out to like in the public sphere, and a comment he makes to this boyfriend he's dating at the time, non-black person, he makes this comment that the black community is so homophobic, so like coming out would not be generally accepted, which I thought was funny because throughout this show you don't really see that for the most part except from his father. I remember seeing a lot of discussion about how it was bad to sort of portray the black community as monolithically homophobic. Mm-hmm. But I think something that was missing for me, a piece I was missing was identifying that sort of self-hate, and that sort of internalized idea of the black community that character had, and understanding where that came from, and how to deconstruct that overall. So I wanted to sort of bring it home to all of us and our own analyzing our own personal experiences, because I have a lot of personal experiences that relate to that topic. So I wanted to ask all of you, what has each of your experiences been like being an LGBT person of color, and sort of navigating your queer identity within your racial or cultural or religious communities? Do you want to start, Yesenia?
There's a queer Chicana from Oxnard. Talking about location's really important. And for me, ever since then, it hasn't been when we talk about the intersection of identity, for me it's been, I don't know, it's always been I can't separate one thing from the other. Mm-hmm. And in terms of my community, I don't think it's ever come up where it's an issue, or I don't know. Even the notion of coming out, I don't necessarily like, which is interesting because the actor who plays Jamal also had something very similar. He was like, "Oh, I never had to come out of the closet because there's never been a closet."
Right.
He's always just been him. He never had to pretend to be anything else because his family was accepting of it. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Do you think that maybe there'd be some experiences in a general sense that maybe people other queer Chicanas might feel?
Well, I think there's always a generalization of a community. I've had a conversation similar to about patriarchy in the Chicano Latino community, and they're like, "Oh, Chicano Latinos are so patriarchal because they have machismo," and I'm just like, that's the same thing as patriarchy. We have it in English too. I think no one that, like, being a Chicana Latino coming from that community, it doesn't make us any more prone to being homophobic or being patriarchal, because it's the society we live in. So I think it's also when you pair that up with a lot of Latinos tend to be Catholic, you know, you have some clashes. I'm positive that things are changing, and even if they're not, like, I feel like I believe in this term chosen family, and, you know, that a lot of queer folks, you know, like, uphold or, like, believe in, where, like, even if our family, like, ends up rejecting us for our queer identity, we create our own families.
What do you think?
And I guess it's interesting for me to navigate because I'm not out to my family, and I never really had, like, that whole idea of, like, having to come out because I'm still very unsure about doing so. So I guess my feeling of how do I navigate within the community is a little tricky because here at school, I'm out. Like, I tell people, I gleefully tell them about, like, my identity and what makes it up and, like, how that works for me. But it's tricky because there's that, because I'm Chinese, and so my family is relatively traditional, not super conservative, but a little bit so. And so whenever they have news stories about it on the news and stuff, there's, like, little comments and things, so that makes me, and they had a big fuss when I cut my hair. You know, and being like, why do you want to look like a guy and everything? And I just do. I'm not gonna attach this subject right now.
Right.
Yeah, but there's also that sense that being queer isn't an Asian thing. It's something that white people do. My uncle's a contractor up in SF, and he goes and, like, they do work at, like, remodeling a lot of, like, very affluent gay men's homes. But he's always talking about, like, the gay people, but it's, like, the white gay people. Specifically, you know, like, there's not that sense that people who are queer come in other flavors,
right?
You know, or like that. Like, I'm pretty sure my family has some ideas based on the way that I'm starting to, like, present myself. But since I'm not saying anything explicit, they're not, like, being forced to confront it directly yet, you know. But I get this sense that like you said, that no one culture is any more, like, predisposed to be homophobic than another, and, like, historically, I don't know that Chinese culture is generally homophobic exactly.
So for me, it's really, I don't want to say, like, confusing because I'm racially I'm black and white, but I grew up with my younger sister's family, and my younger sister, she's half Mexican, so I grew up mostly around, like, Chicano Latino family, and a lot of what I've seen from my family, because I consider them my family, like, I call myself the secret Mexican because I'm, like, I grew up with, like, Mexican people my whole life, and the thing that, like, always got me about my family was, because I have 3 cousins that are lesbian, and they will, oh, my niece, I love her, but as soon as they're, like, not around, they're over there talking crap about them being gay. So I get in a lot of, like, fights with them when it comes to, like, subjects like this. But I feel like a lot of that has to do, too, with, like, the religious aspect of it, because to them, like, oh, gay people it's a sin, they're not supposed to, like, you know, you're not supposed to be with someone of the same gender. But I'm like, it doesn't say that anywhere in the Bible. Prove it to me, and they can never prove it to me, and that's when we get into those big debates. But the thing about, like, my immediate family, like, people that I'm closest to, they're very accepting of, I guess, different people, if you want to say that. It took me a while to come out. I've always kind of known that I've been bisexual, but I've never really, like, came out because I was trying to figure out stuff, and am I really, like, kind of going through that, like, I guess, back and forth kind of debate in my head. And then when I finally did come out, I actually came out, I wrote a column piece for the Sporting Daily, and I pretty much was like, yeah, guys, I'm bi. And my aunt, like, when I get home, she's like, how come you never told us? Like, she was so mad that I, like, never told her. I'm like, because it has nothing to do with you. Like, my sexual identity, whatever, my personal identity has nothing to do with my family. It's my own thing. So if they're not going to be accepting of me, I don't really care.
Yeah, thank you all. I think for me, back when I was, like, 18 and sort of, like, coming to terms with my identity, I grew up in a Muslim family, and you know, I only grew up with like my family's experience of an idea of what Islam was, and yeah, I just believe that like all Muslims are like the same as my parents were, because I never knew anything else, and my parents are very conservative and very like adhering to gender roles, and also like you know, like the roles of like marriage and like man and woman, and you know, it's very like homophobic and heteronormative, and you know, I never like possibly believe that like there could be Muslims that are queer like besides me, or even like Muslims that were, you know, accepting and are allies, and you know, for the longest time I believed that, and I think that's still like the general consensus of like how people see Islam, is that it's a homophobic religion, it's a sexist religion, and well, you know, like people like Bill Maher, like they use that to sort of justify like their Islamophobia and their sort of generalization of the religion. And you know, it really took me I just like meeting people in the community and meeting like progressive Muslims and also like other queer Muslims to really like deconstruct those ideas that I had, and really open myself up. How can we like sort of pinpoint, you know, those ideas of, you know, internalized racism, internalized sort of prejudice against our racial, ethnic communities, and so like under sort of deconstruct those things, because I feel like a lot of us still struggle with internalizing the ideas that, you know, white supremacy teaches us, and of, you know, like the things that we might experience in our families isn't what all, you know, people of this community face. How have each of you sort of pinpointed that, and how do you think we can sort of like spread that message to other folks?
I talked about how for me, like, my self-hate has always been more about my low self-esteem. I personally believe that when a person has low self-esteem, when they feel bad about themselves, that's when they kind of like accept the negativity, especially when it comes to like stuff about their identity. And for me, like, I'm still working on like my low self-esteem, my body image, like stuff like that. It's still something that I'm like continually working on. It's a lot better from like when I was younger, especially the fact that I was able to like come out is like a really big step in like my life. It was like a turning point in my life. I feel like just realizing that when people have these like negative attitudes towards whether it's your race, your ethnicity, your religion, your gender, whatever it is, it's just that it's not about you. It's about, I don't know, maybe just what they've learned. That the way that person is thinking is like totally, it's the reason why like this society is being held back, is because of those people. Like, the only way we can progress is if we are like accepting of differences. And that's the reason why there's so many fights, is because people are so like against stuff that's like to them is not normal. And that's why we have like wars about religion, wars about whatever country it is. I mean, I don't know if I make any sense, but I personally believe that because we're not accepting of differences is why the world is pretty much the way it is.
Because like you mentioned about like self-hate, I don't know that it's self-hate so much as just wrestling with how to reconcile the different aspects of my identity, I think. Because, you know, it's funny because like intellectually, like I know all this stuff with like feminism and like, you know, the different like, and like all the different structures that are like oppressive, and like ways that we can like fight it and talk, you know, and be like thinking about what ideas we've internalized and realizing that, oh, hey, that's actually something that patriarchy is teaching us and we don't have to fight that. But like, even though intellectually I know all of those things, it's still hard. It's for a lot of ideas I haven't made that jump from like intellect, you know, from that to knowing it in here. So it's really funny because it's like talking about like feminism and being like, oh, you know, you should, like, loving your body and like knowing like who you are is who you are. Like, don't let people like label you, and you know, and don't buy into those ideas of like gender roles or what women should be to be considered women or so forth. I knew all of that going in, and I would still have these wrestling with ideas like, oh, like I don't fit that box, so can I still call myself a woman? right? Like, I don't fit these things. Do I, you know, or I don't, but I don't, it's like, I don't want to be a man, but I don't feel like I fit all the stereotypical, like, behaviors and beliefs and so forth. Like, do I still fit into that box? It's a process, right? To like, unlearn the stuff you've already internalized and internalize the new stuff that will hopefully work better as a new framework for thinking about things.
That takes time, though. Like, I feel like with anything, like, when I talk about, like, my body image and, like, low self-esteem, it's because of, like, stuff that has happened to me, like, as a child and stuff like that. And something that you've been, I guess, has been shoved down your freaking head for 20 years or whatever, how many years, it's gonna take a while to unravel that, like, mess. Over time, you can be the person that you want to be. It just, you have to work on it. And it's hard. It's exhausting, but it's possible.
But I think it's also really important, like, to know that when we talk about, like, self-hate or, like, just about our specific communities, we're only breaking it down to the individual level. And I think a lot of these things, like, you know, self-hate and, like, it all stems from, like, systematic things. They all stem from bigger problems in our society. And, like, no one wants to touch that because, you know, like, it's like this untold, like, you know, or unseen force.
Taboo.
Like, you know, like, the reason why a lot of folks have, like, body image issues is because, you know, like, the European standard of beauty, like, who the heck is supposed to be beautiful? What is beautiful? And it's not our bodies. It's not, you know, folks of color. It's definitely not, like, folks of color who don't fit the gender binary. You know, we're seen as dangers. We're seen as outsiders. We're seen as other. And I think it's important to realize that this doesn't stem from, oh, all of a sudden, you know, a 5-year-old is like, oh, I just don't like the way I look. Or I don't like, or I don't think, you know, I am pretty, or I don't think I am okay, or I'm normal. Like, it stems from things that we see, you know, systems that reinforce that through religion, through the media, through gender roles, school, through our parents, through people, like, people we don't even know on the street. And I think that's why, like, even every single day that, like, you know, like, brown folks or, like, people of color or, you know, queer folks are alive, is the fact that we're alive is just, you know, fighting that self-hate, fighting those things that we're told, like, it's a revolution. Every day we wake up, it's a revolution because that's what we have to do.
You know, these things aren't just here, like, they're not just present, but these things are systemically enforced, and they become permeated throughout our society, throughout our families, throughout our parents, and they come down to us personally. And yeah, I think it's important to analyze, like, the history of those socially constructed ideas and those politics, and how like, our families are, like, really traumatized by, you know, things like colonialism, by genocide, by war, by, you know, the enforcement of white supremacy. And, you know, these things become, you know, enforced through just the way we think, and a lot of that is why, like, I think there's so much, like, problems within each of our communities and each of our families, that it's not that they're to blame. It's that, you know, the larger picture. And for me, that's what's helped me to deconstruct the ideas I had about, like, all Muslim people, and really, you know, like, embracing our identities in our own ways, and what, you know, being Chicana, being Asian, being, you know, mixed race, you know, all of these things, what that means to us personally, and how to, like, identify with those things in a way that, you know, overpasses, like, the systemic problem. I feel like it's important to analyze and pinpoint, you know, the internalized prejudices that, you know, a lot of us as queer people of color, especially, like, facing those intersections, might deal with, and to, like, I think promote better messages, and promote, you know, like, more safer community spaces that, you know, like, we can relate to. And it's been growing, like, like it's not always covered like in our mass media, but
That's
you know,
my
these
goal as a
discussions,
journalist.
right? These
'Cause I know I
discussions
see
have been
it, and I
happening
know
for a
lot
long
of
time.
the crap in society has to do with like media, and
Right.
I feel like the more presence that, you know, people of color, queer people, women that we have in media, the
Mhm.
more influence we could have to change it, and that's
Mhm.
like always been my ultimate goal.
And I like your idea of like having more representation, because like just being like a queer Asian of color, like just queer Asian, like French Chinese, like I don't see anybody who looks like that in my
Right.
you know, you see anyone who like is gonna be queer, you're either, it's like mostly white. I mean, now with like
Yeah.
Laverne Cox, there's like black
Always,
women
yeah.
out there, and that's pretty awesome. But like,
There needs to be more.
yeah, and it's
I
like,
want to see a
Yeah, like-
queer Asian person on TV.
But I think more than just that, like, we also need to go ahead and, because representation, anyone can have representation,
Right.
but we need to like do something beyond that. Because
Right.
you can have, you know, like a Uncle Tom,
Shitty
you know, every
representation.
single
Yeah.
day.
yeah.
That's true.
So it's just
Yeah.
like about
Positive.
action, and creating and changing the ways our society is. Because, you know, maybe we need to go ahead and dismantle the media. Who owns the media? We need to do other things and just ask for representation.
Right. On that note, I think we're running out of time, so I'll end it here. But this was great. I think I learned a lot from this, listening to all of you. Yeah, thank you for being here. Okay.
Yay.
Okay.